Thank you so much, Ale. It's a really nice and a very thought-provoking, soul-searching story, I guess, that you look back and think, yeah, aren't we in a limited world, though we think we take things for granted. So yes, like to open up for questions, and I've kept a few questions ready in case if you take time to ask questions, but this is your time. And can I share your secret? Can I take the liberty to share your secret, Matt, that you're joining from a car?
Yeah, right. I think it's out now.
And he seems to have the nicest home compared to all of us. All right. Let me pull out my questions until you. Oh, okay, Adrienne has a question. Please go ahead.
Yes, so thank you so much. First of all, I'd really like to thank Matthew. It was a fantastic demonstration of the circular economy and energy. So I've never, in all my years of working in the circular economy, I've never had anybody explain it like you have. So I think that really needs to, really need to generate more awareness around the relationship between the circular economy and energy, which is really low on the discourse at the moment, and that needs to change. Alessandra, my wish is that the shooting star isn't rubbish from the space station. So, but anyway, back to materials, because that's high on my list of priorities of working. And I'm not a materials scientist, but I'm obsessed with the development of a secondary raw materials industry, which touches on both of your disciplines, just in very different ways. And you didn't really cover anything about the reprocessing sectors for perhaps obvious reasons. But so my questions are around those my own personal interests. So I do apologize that I'm not tackling your personal interests. One of the biggest problems that I have found, it's not it's that we recognize that we need to reduce the amount of not just waste, but we need to really transition from waste management to materials management. And that's my big thing, is that transition. And I'm beating the drum quite heavily on that. And it's a great concept, a great story. Nobody understands how to do that. But one of the things is that we need to be able to identify more clearly the materials that we use. Because one of the biggest criticisms that we get in the circular economy is the fact that we are, many of the materials get downcycled. So if you think about metals, and especially alloys, they aren't identified, and so they're collected and they are smelted down, and then that material, the new material that comes out of that, doesn't have the same properties, and so therefore they don't have the same market that you would have from a virgin metal. And so that's really one of the biggest criticisms. So the aim is to try and develop a system where we get into more identification of materials so that we can really manage them in much better ways that enables us to manage the energy that we use in all aspects of our material usage. And so I'm wondering, it's a big question, but how do you think we could go about tackling that? Or do you agree, first of all, that I'm, that my assumptions are correct, and if they are, how would we go about that identification?
Matt, you could take that?
Yeah, sure. No, I absolutely thank you for your comments, Adriana. And yeah, absolutely, I think you are correct. But it's necessary but not sufficient to identify the material. So absolutely needed. But well, there's behavioral changes needed. But the problem is, and from our perspective, we're doing the wrong thing as material scientists is that we're developing increasingly new materials. Sure, we can label them, but that makes it increasingly more difficult to reuse them because it just increases the complexity. So it's a complexity problem as well as an identification problem. And so the answer to me, it's difficult to implement, but it just has to be economically viable. So if we identify all the materials, fantastic. But then how do we separate them? And so at the moment, from an alloy perspective, there's very, very clever technologies where you granulate and you can detect different components. But that's only useful if you can get the return on the investment that the machine requires. So I guess I'm not really answering the question, but it's absolutely necessary to identify. And we've actually had people talk to us, how can I identify this alloy through some like a secret or some identifier that survives melting. It's not nearly impossible. The only way you could do it is probably some with little radioactive marker or something. But even then, it's all the technologies that go around to collecting it afterwards and so on. So we think long term we have to simplify the material streams, and so that will make it far more ready. So the alloys and metals that get recycled largely are those in big volumes. So we have a lot of this and a lot of that. It's when you have little bits of lots of things that it becomes even more difficult. So it's a very, very big problem, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, you see,
Right.
that's the issue, is that because it's such a big problem, we're avoiding it. And I think we should stop avoiding it. And I think we need to jump in. I'm absolutely believe that you're right. We don't need more materials. And we do need to manage and simplify the materials that we've got. But anyway, I'll stop talking. There's others who want to have something to say, including Mayuri.
But there's a few questions that have come on chat as well as Sarah is waiting. Would you like to go ahead, Sarah?
Oh, thank you very much. Both of your presentations were very interesting. And Alessandra, I love the way you made it aspirational and put a bit of reality check in it. So mine, I work in the small business space, but also have a passion for it. And it was really interesting, Alessandra, what you said about the bamboo and that the processing and the energy. And I think that there's a lot of consumer misconceptions, lots of marketing that might not be deemed as greenwashing, but is. And my question is about what do we do as a society? What does government need to do to dispel that and get the right information so that, for a start, if consumers have the right information, they can make better decisions? And what's the solution for that?
Thank you, Sarah. The solution is never single faceted, right? It's like dodecahedron, lots of different facets. At the end, it's it will sound like I'm washing my hands of it, but it's an information management issue. We recognize that marketing oftentimes uses tricks to stimulate our emotional response and make us a bit more responsive or keener to take up certain products. And the only way to counter that is education, having a critical mind and having a critical approach to things. So in part, the job is on us scientists. We're often not communicating sufficiently clearly to the population. We communicate very well to each other, but oftentimes cracking that ceiling between the scientists and the community is what we can do and what we should do more of. Talking with the political system, that's another thing that needs to be done. We see the discussion about climate change, how easy it is to point to evidence, yet how hard it is to translate that evidence into survivable policy, policy that survives a cycle, election cycle. And similar problem applies here to materials research. And in terms of small enterprises, they are the ones that are actually driving consumer behavioral change. And the consumers and the new generations of consumers that are coming online, we see as making the biggest impact at the moment, in that they are changing behaviors and they're encouraging others through social media to look deeply into the origins of things. So as a small and medium enterprise person, I commend you for taking the steps already. It is most likely you're more advanced than other colleagues, just because you have that agility.
So I'm part of the ACCC committee, right? And that's what I'm thinking. We need academia to be also aligned. The ACCC have made greenwashing a priority. However, we're not dispelling the information, and therefore we're only there to slap the wrist. But what's the work that we need to do to actually educate on what it actually is? And I'd love to explore it further offline, but thank you very much, both of you. Very interesting. Thanks,
Please
Mayuri.
be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If I'm to add a bit more to that, Sarah, on one of the ways to simplify decisions for the consumer is happening through what we call certification schemes, product certification schemes. So, you know about the Australian standard for carbon neutrality, which is climate active, which provides kind of a standard assessment for energy certification, basically carbon. The extent of carbon that has gone into an organization or a product, or like, so there's a standard assessment being done. So for products, there are other types of certifications, like some of the companies available in the market or other organizations who certify them. There's eco labels, which goes through a very comprehensive criteria in analyzing global green tag. Like there are a few other sort of certifying parties for different product categories. So I understand the question you would have is like, look, there are multiple in the market. Who do we trust? Who's actually going to the depth and rigor of the assessment that that you kind of can place confidence on that it is not greenwashing. So probably there's at some point there are increasingly, I think, work happening at the government level to check what are credible schemes. Organizations like Planet Arc, for example, who are kind of a community organization, circular economy, they're working on basically listing parties for accreditation like that. So probably there's the energy aspect of the product, resource aspect of the product, and these different ones are captured by different type of certification schemes. And that is how the procurer, or in this case, the consumer is the procurer, can get that information at the point of decision making. Yeah, probably there's more work and alignment, education needs to happen, but currently in the market, that's the way to endorse, accredit, certify. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any more questions? So I've got a question which I kind of set aside, thinking that this might be a question that you would come across. Oh, by the way, there was a few questions on chat for Ellie and Matt. Maybe we could go ahead with them first. For Alessandra, are you aware of enzymatically recycled nylon done by Samsara? Is this an effective way to help reduce impact from textiles?
Thank you for the question. I can speak to the complexity of the research that is happening. Every single bit of research that is going towards trying to recycle materials, give a new life to materials, destructure and destruct and reconstruct materials is going to be helpful. There are many different technologies that we need to look at, because the energy costs will keep changing in the future. And so the envelope that Matthew was talking about is something that we need to keep in mind in terms of what do we do, when we do it, and how to best do it. So I applaud any and every example of research that is going towards greater recycling, reuse, cleaning of materials so they can be better recycled later. But I just want to say that it takes extraordinary effort from industry, and sometimes industry and academia and industry and government to get there. So when we see companies that are already quite a way down the track, that is an example of something that has good probability of working at larger scale.
And there's a question for Matt on chat as well about Fairphone. Shall I read out the question, Matt?
That's all right. I've seen it. The question is, it's from Darren. Do I believe if Fairphone reduces the costs of convenience? Yeah, so I'm familiar with it. I guess what I'm proposing is that you need to analyze it. It's not just about circularity for the sake of the story. And I'm not making a comment on Fairphone because I haven't done the analysis on them, but it is possible to make something circular, but requires more energy to do so. In which case, I don't think it really does serve a circular economy. It may help with a little bit of mass flow potentially, but one needs to have a look at the energy required. And that's something that struck us. We were looking at some of these metal processes. Oh, great, we can reuse metal that way. And then we looked at it and go, wow, if it's for a certain metal that is cost effective to produce because the energy is low and we're pumping all this extra energy in, then that solution is not a good solution if we want to take the accounting properly. So yeah, sorry, I can't really answer the question, but rather than say how I'd go about answering the question, I'd have a look and see what are the energetics of the processes that they're using.
Yeah. If I'm to comment on that quickly, probably the two things that Matt mentioned, one is the impact, which usually is measured through a life cycle assessment. And the other one is the ability to regenerate, where you could actually think of the potential to reuse it and at what utility and what value. So these are kind of two fundamental tests to do. And circularity, or rather regeneration, achieved at the cost of high impact, is actually a question, because ultimately what you're trying to reduce is the environmental impact, and typically that takes generally a higher priority, especially with the climate emergency situation we're in. So probably it's a balance of both of them, but then one achieved at the cost of the other is something we should generally question. So those fundamental two things are to be looked at in general, I would say. Any more questions coming? I'll quickly, before we end, because I set aside 3 questions, I have been waiting. I'll ask one of the questions on material development. I think this is something that industries who are likely to kind of are looking forward to work with universities might have. Are these material developments costly? Do they take a lot of time? What are like sometimes what act as a barrier for let's say a small business or a medium scale business who like to do innovations and R&D to engage with a university like what you're doing to get engaged in projects? What's the way to start? How difficult it is? How easy it is?
All right, so maybe I could start on that. Well, just the conversation with people, and yeah, if you articulate your interest, then a lot of us are sort of linked into networks, so we can help with the barrier of finding the right person to talk to. But at the challenge is the economics of the issue. Very often, it's just a reality that we can't ignore. And so some of our partners are quite taken by the energy approach because they pay for energy, and so energy is a massive cost. You can do a plot of materials, and so the price of the material versus the energy required to make it, and it's nearly a linear plot. Well, it's a log plot, but anyway, there's quite heavy correlation, and so energy costs. And so if we want to reduce the energy, then it's a potential pathway of reducing your costs. Now, the challenge is who pays for what. Now, if you have a new model where you own the product always, and you have custodianship of that, so it's your direct economic benefit to be adopting the circular principles. And so I think that's why it's nice that it's called a circular economy, because the trick for making it happen, as with so many human endeavors, is we have to make it economically attractive. I think that's just the reality that we deal with. So what I guess I'm saying is that there are many pathways for economic benefit through adopting the circular economy.
Righty. Thank you, Matt and Ale. I think we're coming to the conclusion of the webinar. Let me share my screen quickly with you to do the conclusion part. So So about our future events and other webinars being done, we haven't still
Sorry,
announced the
Mayuri,
next one.
we're not seeing your
Next
screen.
webinar. So we've done a few webinars in the last few months, happening sometimes every 6 weeks, usually within a month or so.
Mayuri?
So this is the one on the material design. We have a few courses running in the
Mayuri.
in the next few months. We had one course just finished on the 30th of July. And then there's one on developing
Excuse me,
roadmaps, there's a circular
Mayuri.
procurement course, and also how to
hear.
evaluate alternative materials. That's happening in February. We would love if we could get feedback from you on how we found the webinar, and that I would be able to pass on to Matt and Ali as well. And at the same time, it'll help us find the topics that you
Who do you want to message?
like to.
Mayuri,
That was
can you
Siri.
hear us?
Do you want to send it or change it? Okay, cancelled.
I'm sorry. Yes, we'd love to have your feedback, and thank you so much for engaging with us, and a big thanks to Matt and Ale on joining and sharing a very informative content.
Mayuri, we couldn't see your screen.
Oh, sorry.
We tried to stop you, but you weren't listening.
Okay.
You had the wrong screen up.
Right.
You had your chat screen, so we were privy to your private conversations.
All righty. Are you seeing the screen at the moment?
We're seeing your Teams window. Now we can see the presentation, yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry, this is
No,
the
we can see
presentation I
Matt's
had.
presentation.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
There we go. That's better.
So this is the webinars, set of webinars we had, and today's one, and then the upcoming courses are here. So if you have an interest to register, please let us know. But I want to share the barcode with you so that if you could share your feedback, that would be great. So thank you for participating in the webinar. And once again, special thank you to Matt and Ali for speaking and sharing your insights.